Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second in this Brodies series of webinars on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and the potential impact of the incorporation of the Convention in Scots law. My name is Christine O'Neill. I'm the chairman of Brodies, and I'm going to be chairing this session this afternoon. It's quite a busy session this afternoon. We've got a number of different voices that you are going to hear and who will be contributing to this conversation. In a moment, I'm going to introduce the Children and Young People's Commissioner Scotland, Bruce Adamson, and then I'll speak to the Commissioner for a short while to hear his thoughts on the UNCRC Bill and the work of his office. And after that, I'll introduce you to our expert panel of young people from across Scotland and ask them to share their views on the convention and on a number of other topics. Then after that, what I will do is let the panel turn the tables on the Commissioner and ask him some questions. And we're also really keen to get questions from those of you who are watching this session this afternoon. So if you do have questions for our panel, if you have questions for the Commissioner, then please do jot those down in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to those in the course of the afternoon. So quite a lot to get through. Before we begin on the substance, I want to thank particularly Alex Conway, who is the projects coordinator for the Scottish European Educational Trust, or SEAT, who has been incredibly supportive of this event and without whom it wouldn't have happened. SEAT run 2 educational projects with school pupils across Scotland every year. Both focus on global citizenship and on language learning. They run the Euro Quiz, which is a national quiz with primary 6 pupils, and also Our World, which is a filmmaking project involving year 3 and up to 6th year pupils in secondary school, asking them to make short multilingual films. Brodies has been involved from time to time in this project in providing sets and facilities for these films, but the films tend to focus on themes relating to global citizenship. And I know that we've got some Our World participants in the audience today, so thank you for joining us, and thank you very much, Alex, for your involvement. So if we can begin by introducing the Commissioner. Bruce Adamson is the Children and Young People Commissioner Scotland. He is responsible for promoting and safeguarding the rights of children and young people across Scotland. He works closely with children and young people and has been heavily involved in some important law reform work around the age of criminal responsibility, the protection of children from physical punishment, and of course, the incorporation of the UN Convention itself. He's been a lawyer for more than 20 years, specialising in human rights law, and he's acted as an international expert in a wide range of international institutions, including at the UN, the Council of Europe and the European Union, and he's the current chair of the European Network of Ombudspersons for Children, which he can tell us no doubt a bit more about. And I think I'll introduce the expert panel after we've had the conversation with the Commissioner. So if I say goodbye to the panel for the moment, Bruce, if you're content, we'll just kick off with a bit of a discussion about what you do and what your office is involved in. And I'm going to start with what is perhaps a bit of a technical question, which is around the bill that has been passed by the Scottish Parliament to incorporate the Convention in Scots law. And so for our audience, some of you may know this, the way in which this is being done now is a rather different way to that which has been tried in the past, where we've had individual bits of legislation in different areas of the law that have tried to reflect the Convention. Here we've got something much more comprehensive, incorporating the Convention in a wholesale way. And I wonder, Bruce, if you could maybe say a little bit about why you think that difference is important and what you expect to gain out of that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Christine, and welcome everyone. I've got the best job in the world as Children and Young People's Commissioner, because it's my job to safeguard and promote rights. And the Convention on the Rights of the Child and its incorporation is the most important thing that we can do to ensure that children's rights are respected and protected and fulfilled across Scotland. And I think it's a real tribute to all of the children and young people and all the civil society organizations that have campaigned for so long to get this. And the point about incorporating the convention as a whole is really important, full and direct incorporation, because what we know from other countries that have done it is it brings about a really important culture change. And so rather than having a separate bill on housing to ensure that the adequate standard of living right is fulfilled, you actually link everything together. And so the importance of having the whole convention in, there's a few different elements of it. One is that it's important so we can compare internationally. And so we stick with the international system that the UN oversees. And so as our understanding of rights develop over time, we need to link closely in with that so we can compare our progress against others and also develop for things like changes in the digital world. And so it's really important that we use the commitments we've already made in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and we bring those into our law so that we can keep in line with the international community. That's a really important first point. Secondly, in terms of the practical impact, it's important to realize that all of the rights within the convention are interrelated. And so what the convention does is it sets out all the things that the government at all levels has to do to make sure that children can thrive. And there's important links between things like poverty, impacts on health and mental health and education. Education helps us understand about the natural world, making sure that there's no discrimination, cuts through absolutely everything. And also really important things like making decisions in a child's best interest or the participation of children and young people. All of these things flow through and are interconnected. And so the problem is if you start breaking them apart and have a separate piece of legislation on housing and a separate one on ensuring children have got enough to eat and a separate one on health provision, is that you lose that holistic view of children's rights. And so what's really important is that we've got one law which sets the rights framework, and then you can build upon that with separate pieces of law as well, because that's a really important point, is that the Convention on the Rights of the Child allows you to go further. And so what the best solution is to do as we've done, you incorporate the whole legislation. That leads to big culture change. And then you have additional pieces of legislation which set out the way in which we're going to properly fulfill those rights.
So I'm really tempted to ask you a question now in response to that, Bruce, which I'm going to save for the later session or part of the session, but that's about, and don't answer this now, about why children aren't just ordinary people. And I'm sure you'll know the answer to that backwards, but we'll maybe get to that later on in the session. So we know that the bill has been passed by the Parliament. We know it's not quite law yet, because it has been referred by the UK government to the UK Supreme Court. And again, some of our audience may know a little bit about that, but I don't know if you could maybe explain what has happened and whether you have any thoughts on what the outcome of that might be.
Yeah, this is a really important question. I know people are concerned about it. My starting point is I'm quite relaxed about it. And so this is a really important part of the process where once the Scottish Parliament passes a law, and the Scottish Parliament passed this unanimously, every single member of Parliament at the Scottish Parliament voted for the law to incorporate the Convention on the Rights of the Child. But one of the important kind of checks and balances is that law officers, including at the UK level, can refer it to the Supreme Court if they've got concerns that the Scottish Parliament has gone further than the power that it's been given under the Scotland Act in terms of devolution. And so the UK law officers on behalf of the UK government have said that there's two parts of the bill that they are worried go too far. And the really important starting point is what they've said is that they absolutely accept that the Scottish Parliament has the power to pass this bill, and they accept every other part of the bill. So this is actually a ringing endorsement for the bill that's being passed, and just two small question marks that the Supreme Court has to resolve. And so one of those is about the scope of who this applies to. And so for section 6 of the bill, if you want to have a look at it, what it says is about who is covered by the bill, and what the bill does on children's rights. It expands a little bit wider than the Human Rights Act, which it's based on. And the reason that we did that, we got some amendments to the bill to make it apply a bit broader than the Human Rights Act, because we were concerned about public bodies, particularly contracting things out. And so wanted to make really clear within the bill that this should cover all public duties, even if you pay someone else to do it. And so we don't want a situation where someone's doing something really important like housing, and they contract out to a private contractor. And we want to make sure that those rights are all covered. And so there's some concerns the UK law officers have got that goes a little bit too far. And there's another piece of the bill that they've got concerns about, which would apply the bill to Westminster legislation if it's on devolved issues. And so this is where the UK Parliament sometimes passes laws that are things that are devolved to Scotland on health and education, other things, justice. And the bill seeks to include some of those within the ability to challenge them. And so again, the UK law officers are asking the court whether that maybe goes a little bit too far. So it's a matter that's before the Supreme Court. We've had conversations with the Supreme Court about whether it might be useful for us to intervene in that case. And the court said that actually they don't think it would be useful for us to intervene because it's a very narrow constitutional point they're looking at. They're not wanting to look more broadly at the kind of rights arguments, but rather it's just about whether the Scottish Parliament's gone too far. And they're going to hear that case later this month on the 28th and 29th. And so we should know the answer later in the year about whether any changes are necessary. My strong view is that the law is sound. We helped draft some of the amendments. I think that it's going to be a positive result to say that the bill's okay, but the worst case scenario will be if they say that it's not, and we need to do some very small amendments to those very small parts of the bill. And either way, the bill also contains an ability to commence the legislation as soon as the government wants to. So there's the idea was that it would come into effect 6 months after royal assent, which should have been probably last month. We're delayed a bit now, but the bill actually allows for an early commencement. So my hope is that we'll get a positive decision from the Supreme Court a little bit later this year, and we can use that early commencement provision to allow us to get back on track and have the bill in force by the end of the year.
And of course, our audience will know that they can watch the Supreme Court hearing live, just like this session, even more interesting than this session. And quite a lot of the Supreme Court hearings now are being done virtually. I think this one might actually be in person in the court, but otherwise you get to see some wonderful curtain arrangements of Supreme Court justices for virtual hearings. So worth checking it out, I would say. And let's assume all goes well and the bill is brought into force. Again, just a little bit about how you expect your work and your colleagues' work to change as a result of this new law.
Yeah. So there's lots of really powerful stuff in this new law. And so what it's going to do is change the way in which decisions are made is the main thing, so that everyone who makes a decision on behalf of children and young people that affects their rights has to do so in a way that complies with the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is amazing. But if they don't, there's going to be the ability to hold them to account in a way that's never existed before, particularly on economic, social, cultural rights. Some of the things like poverty-related issues or education or health, there's going to be a lot more accountability. And one of the mechanisms of accountability is to give my office additional powers to take cases or to intervene in cases that are taken on others' behalf. And what we've seen in other countries that have done this in advance of us is that you don't get a huge number of additional cases. It's not like everyone rushes to the courts, because going to the court is one of the worst ways of coming up with a solution to something. We always want to solve things by not making the mistake in the first place, or by resolving it in the easiest way. The court's the hardest way to resolve something. So we don't want to see lots of cases go to court. But the fact that you might get taken to court really focuses the minds. And so what we've seen in other countries is a lot more of a change in decision-making, a lot more children and young people involved in decision-making, giving effect to that right in Article 12 to have your view taken in anything that affects you. Lots more cases that more strongly demonstrate that they're being made in the best interest of the child. And so what you get is this cultural change. And so a lot of our work will be working with public bodies to make sure that they're doing things properly, doing impact assessments involving children and young people, lots of our work will be working directly with children and young people to build up your ability to challenge and to make sure that your rights are getting fulfilled. So there'll be a lot of that type of work, working with young human rights defenders, and probably a little bit of additional litigation, but it'll probably be more around the ability to use rights arguments in cases that we're probably already going to have to go to court, rather than new cases, is the experience in other places. So one of the things that we said when we gave evidence to Parliament was that we didn't seek a big increase in our budget because we thought there were better places to spend that money, and also because we didn't foresee having to run up big legal bills and taking lots of cases, because we wanted to really focus on the cultural change, and that's what we've seen in other places around the world as well.
And as a partner in a litigation practice who's in the courts all the time, I completely agree that there are much better ways of sorting out problems than litigation. But as we also know, sometimes it proves to be unavoidable. Commissioner, thank you very much. I'm going to stop there. We will be back though with more questions for you. And I'm going to move now to introduce our panel. And we have 4 panelists with us this afternoon, and very grateful to have all of them with us, and hopefully you will be able to see them on screen in just a moment. But just to introduce our panel to you, firstly, Sophia Calman from Belfron High School, and Sophia is currently studying a number of subjects at higher level, including French, Spanish and modern studies. She is a very creative person. I have her biography here, from sewing to painting, I am told, and she's got a particular passion for theatre, and I know it's her ambition to pursue a career in the theatre industry after school. Alongside Sophia, we have Cara Glass from Holyrood Secondary School. She's in 3rd year at Holyrood, and therefore at that level is studying at BGE level 4, with again a huge range of subjects, including history, physics, chemistry and biology. She's also a creative sort who enjoys drawing and painting, and as she says in her biography, I think a little bit ironically, she likes, when possible, to be going out and about and spending time with friends and family. So we'll come back to that. We also have Rebecca Freeman, who was, I think, at Aberdeen Grammar School until literally moments ago, has just left school after 6th year at Aberdeen Grammar, just finished sitting advanced hires in French, history and maths, and she's off to Edinburgh University in the autumn to study international relations with French. Bit more sporty than creative, I think, a hockey player and a cook who also enjoys to spend time with her friends, and with ambitions to pursue a career in the law, perhaps at a later stage. And finally, we have Holly Grieve from George Watson's College, who's in 5th year, studying hires, including modern studies and economics, which are her favourite subjects. She's about to embark on advanced hires, and indeed higher Italian, with an ambition to travel to Italy at some stage in the future, which I can only say, Holly, is also my ambition. So I am with you on that. I hope we all get to have the travel that we want to have. So thank you all 4 of you for joining us this afternoon. And I've got a range of questions, really just to get your sense of the state of the world. So not a small topic, but I want to begin with where we are, which is after a year and a quarter of pandemic living and lockdown. I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on what it's been like. And I nearly asked the Commissioner whether we think children and young people are different from ordinary human beings or old folk like me. The question that I really want to begin with is whether, from your perspective, there is a different view of the world in light of the pandemic for children and young people to that which has been experienced by those of us who are a bit older, and whether you think that perspective has been properly taken into account. Sophia, can I start with you for your reaction to that?
I think it's definitely affected everyone across the board. But there are definitely aspects of the pandemic that have affected young people more, especially to do with opportunities that we're recently getting at this young age. So even from things like socializing with our friends to exams, and even those two are linked. So I know that I mainly cope with stress from the school day by socializing with my friends. So I think it is different in that regard, and sort of the things that we have to cope with. And I'd like to say that the government has sort of fairly paid attention across all the board, but I do think a certain amount of blame has been put on some students for spreading the pandemic, which I don't think is fair.
Really interesting. So a kind of sense of shame attributed to young people for the spread, do you think?
A wee bit, yeah, sometimes.
Okay, Cara, why don't you come in on this question too? What's your view about the extent to which COVID has had a different impact on young people to other people?
Well, following on from what was being said, there are different aspects to a young person regarding school, and there was difficulties learning, meaning that people were falling behind, and it was quite difficult to learn digitally without someone being in the room talking to you and speaking. And then it's also giving young people school was a kind of support network for some people to be able to talk to a pastoral care teacher or any other teacher or friends that they trusted in the school. And it's just taken away that support. But over lockdown, it's made it harder to reach out.
And what have you done, or what has been successful for you in trying to replicate that support in a different way? What has worked?
Well, I've been reaching out to friends online instead through social networking platforms, but it would still be nicer to be able to talk face to face with these people.
Yep, I'll second that. Can I just say that's not just a young person thing? I get that it's a particular young person thing, but talking to real people is, I think, something that we've all definitely been missing. I wonder if any of our panelists have a view about whether the way we've dealt with it in Scotland for young people and children has been different from how you think it's been dealt with elsewhere. And I'm reluctant to say better or worse, but maybe different. Holly, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think the main differences I've noticed just from talking with people who may be living in England or Wales has been the difference in schooling and particularly exams, because I know exam results were a very controversial subject sort of in Scotland, but also in England and countries down south. I think it was to a bit of a lesser degree in Scotland. Some people I know in England have had like particular trouble feeling that it was unfair, or they didn't necessarily have the best sort of communication between their government and schools and themselves. Whereas I think that if from my view, Scotland has been slightly more successful in that degree. I wouldn't generalize and say that every student has been very well prepared for everything that's happened, but I feel like there's a sort of sense of unity and a sense of faith that it could get better and could get fair, whereas some other ways of dealing with the pandemic, should we say, have been, I've heard, have been very sort of unfair and slightly confusing. I think it's been the biggest issue for people. Yeah.
Okay, and Rebecca, I've not had your view on the pandemic yet. I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, which is: has there been anything good about it? Is there anything you will miss about lockdown, or has there been anything good that has come out of your experience of the last year and a bit?
Well, I've managed to watch like every show on Netflix, so I'm sure that's some sort of, talent.
I don't know if there's a qualification for that.
I think it really allowed me to kind of take time to myself. As a young person, you're always kind of on the go, and I've just finished 13 years of school. It was kind of nice to have a break and work on, I did colouring in and things like that, and you develop new skills, and I went running, and I think it was nice to take some time for yourself. I don't think everything was handled in the best way. I certainly don't think the education was handled well at all, with the exams being cancelled and then exams happening again and there being no cohesive block. But I think that in terms of being able to have some time to yourself, I think it was good for people to be able to work on themselves and have like a bit of a step back from busy life to kind of reflect and think about what was most important to them and what they valued most in life.
So this is really interesting for me. I'm going to move on to a different theme, but I'm going to stay with you, Rebecca, because I'm going to pick up on something that you just talked about in terms of dissatisfaction with the way things have been handled. And before I get to that, I just want to mention again to the audience that if you agree or disagree with anything that our panelists have said and you want to put some questions to them or to the Commissioner, please drop them in the Q&A box. But what I'd like all of the panelists to think about as a question, and which is the next topic, is really about engagement, because the question that I was going to ask you, Rebecca, which I'm sure is of interest to the Commissioner, is whether you believe or believed that the views of children and young people were being heard, and indeed how they come to be heard, because I want to talk about political engagement, and we've got some questions about the wider political environment. But if you wanted to convey your view about these things, how would you go about it?
I think on most part, I think we have been heard, you know, and I think for young people, they can do lots of different things. You can write letters, sign petitions, you know, you can cause awareness through social media and posting stuff and making sure that your voice is really heard. But I think that sometimes people underestimate young people, and this was our lives too. And I get that so many people have been affected, I really do. And I think that I've had it so much better than most people, but our exams are so important. And I felt like after the exam mix-up last year, where they cancelled the exams and then they upped the grades, downgraded the grades, you know, then they should have listened when we were saying, we need to know one thing. You can't go one way and then go the other. So cancelling the exams at Christmas and then saying in April, by the way, we want you to sit loads of exams. I hadn't sat any prelims, so then I had to sit them at the same time as real exams. I think the mental health of many young people was really affected by that. And I think that was one of the main things that needed to be communicated across. I think it's hard also to communicate it because people in high up places, it's hard to be able to reach them through a lot of different platforms. So yeah.
Okay, interesting. Cara, I'm going to come back to you because there's no age discrimination on this panel session, but I think you're one of our panelists who hasn't been sitting exams or isn't yet in the year group for that. I wonder if on the wider kind of pandemic impact on education, but on other things, if you feel you would know where and how to make your views heard, and whether that was something that you and friends thought about at the time?
There were ways to make your views heard, like again through online. You could, if it was to do with a school matter, be sending emails to teachers and pastoral care teachers as well. So then they were hearing your views and being able to listen to them and find a way to deal or put it up to like a higher place, as in like the head teacher or something. And there were also many petitions as well, as was said, you could sign to make matters heard and make them rise into media for people to actually hear about and then be able to solve.
Okay. Well, this is part of this wider conversation about engagement and about getting your views out there. And I know that we advertised as part of this session that we were going to ask about US politics. I wonder if we wanted to ask about US politics because it's safer than asking about Scottish politics. I'm not sure. But Holly, I'm going to start with you. We've got a newish president of the United States. Does it matter to you that he's nearly the oldest, or is the oldest US president ever elected? Does it in your view make a difference to you, or indeed how he might serve the interests of younger generations?
I think it's really interesting because Joe Biden, if I think back to the election, he was always seen as this like the opposition, and naturally because I think a lot of young people, you know, more liberal, lean towards sort of left-leaning parties. They were kind of grouped together automatically as you're going to be like a Biden supporter. So I think it's interesting that he almost became a much more attractive candidate to younger people purely because his policies were slightly more liberal. So it's almost his personality wasn't quite important. It was more important that he just was the opposition, something to go on. But I think that him being a bit older, it's just, honestly, I think it's something that young people are just tired of. Like, it's like we're a bit tired with everybody's, all politicians are mostly considerably older than us, which almost makes them seem out of touch at the risk of sounding like I'm uninterested in politics, which is not quite the truth. And I think it just makes the whole political process seem really sort of far away and out of reach for young people, which could kind of like discourage their political engagement when all the leaders are sort of older, less in touch with issues and everything. So I think that Joe Biden as a president being one of the oldest it's definitely a change from the previous president, but I don't think that for young people's engagement it's particularly encouraging. I think it's just sort of another in a long series of presidents and powerful politicians who are just older than us, and makes it less attractive. Yeah.
Okay, so as a slightly older person, I'm going to try and put a different complexion on this, and I'm gonna ask Sophia to lend me some support. I don't know if I'll get it, but isn't there an argument that it's not a bad idea to have folk who've been around for quite a long time because they've seen quite a lot and maybe learned quite a lot? Sophia, tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong about that.
I think it's a mix. So I see where you're coming from, where a lot of experience is something that is very valued, especially for such an important role. But I think also agreeing with Holly, sort of an old president sort of also symbolizes sort of old politics, and he might not be as aware of the fact that things may have changed over time. And I am happy that he got it over Trump, if I'm allowed to say that. But at the same time, I don't think I could easily believe that there weren't other candidates who were better for the role as well. Especially since there haven't even been any female presidents, or there's barely been any ethnic minority presidents, which I think would be the real change that we need at this time.
Okay, well, you nearly agreed with me, so I'll take that. That's as much as I get in an ordinary working day, so that's pretty good. I'm going to ask you each to answer exactly the same question, because Sophia, you've made the point about representation and diversity of representation in politics, in public life, but of course, in order to achieve that, you have to get people to volunteer to stand for election or to occupy roles in public life. So for each of you, on a scale of 1 to 10, 0 being under no circumstances would I ever stand for election, and 10 being I'm more politically ambitious than Boris Johnson, I'd like to know where you are on 1 to 10, and I'd like to know what would encourage you and what would put you off getting involved in both elected politics and other public roles. And I'm going to start with Rebecca.
I would say I'm probably at like a solid 9.5. I'm probably going to be discouraged within the next like 5 years after uni, and then I'll never want to do it again. But at the moment, because I'm quite young, I would really like to. And I think that I think the thing that would discourage me would be a money thing, because I think a lot in Parliament, especially in British Parliament, you have people who come from money who then share a certain amount of views that I would find really difficult to agree with. I would find it really difficult to sit on a level playing field, the same level playing field as someone else who thought like benefits should be cut, you know, taxes and everything should be cut. I don't think I could sit and appreciate someone saying that. It would be hard for me to understand.
Good answer. Interesting. Holly, where are you on the scale, and what's for and against public life?
It's really interesting because I am very interested in politics, but I probably place myself as more of like a 4 or 5 on the lower to mid end of the scale, because becoming like an elected official is not something I would consider really, but I would like to participate in sort of other ways, maybe on a more humanitarian side of things. I think that something that is a considerable con for me if it would go to becoming an elected official would be a lot of the public scrutiny that they face seems quite invasive to a certain degree. Obviously, I understand it's important to investigate these things, but that, and also I totally agree with what Rebecca was saying. You can have this image of particularly British politics as a, I'm going to use a phrase, an old boys club, where it's a certain type of person who goes into politics and succeeds and becomes very successful. And I find that slightly off-putting, as much as it is one motivation to want to break a stereotype and go in. It takes a lot of effort, and I think there's other people for the job who would succeed better than I could at that. Perhaps agreeing with Sophia, maybe people from ethnic minorities who would be more suited to representing things which are not the most discussed in British politics better than I would. But I think a pro is, I think sharing a view with a lot of young people now is, a lot of young people are very optimistic and want to make change. So I think that I would definitely want to do something in politics, but not necessarily as an elected official, because the whole culture around that seems not ideal.
I hope quite a lot of our politicians are listening this afternoon. I'm not sure how many of them are tuned in to Brodies, but we'll get you on YouTube. Cara, what do you think about where you are on the scale and the views that you've heard?
I would probably place myself around a 6 or a 7 on the scale, purely because encouragement, to make change, as people have already said, but discouragement, trying to have to break that cycle of it being typically old white males being a politician, typically, and having to try and break that cycle. And myself, I'm not sure if I would be suited for the role, like being able to stand with all the public pressure and be able to actually lead a country or a party.
Thank you. And Sophia, you're last. Where are you? We've got quite a range. Are you down at 0 or 1?
I'm definitely in the middle at a 5. For a mix of reasons, mainly because as much as I love politics and I love understanding our political system, I feel like there's other ways that I can get my views represented, sort of in voting, that I prefer to do over pursuing a career in politics, when I'd sort of rather do other stuff. However, if I were to try and pursue a career in politics, linked to what everyone else has said, I think it is difficult just due to the lack of representation we currently have. And I even think that certain roles in politics still don't give you a lot of control or influence over politics, even sort of having party whips and stuff, which I still think it would be really difficult to get across what you want and the change that you need. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Very, very interesting responses. Thank you very much to you all for being so candid. Now, my next set of questions was going to be around the convention. I'm just looking at the time, and I think what we'll do is we'll bring together that section of my questions to you and your questions to the Commissioner. So I'm going to invite you each to put your question to the Commissioner. If you have anything you want to say about the UNCRC bill and whether you think it's a good thing or not, then feel free to slot that in before you put your question to Bruce. But let's move to what you would like to ask him. I think Holly will start with you.
Yeah, so I have a question more about how the bill sort of came to be law. You mentioned earlier there was lots of campaigning from children and young people groups. I think it was the group Together in particular did lots. So I'd be interested to hear whether you think this is going to cause a real change in the culture and attitude, both to children's views and also in inspiring children to have their views heard, or if you think this is going to reach more of a plateau of we've got this bill across, let's sort of become complacent for the while.
It's a great question, Holly, and I think one of the great things about the bill is that it's just a starting point. It's a really strong legal mechanism. It'll change the way in which things are done, but we then have to use it. The first Children's Commissioner, Kathleen Marshall, described as kind of a bright, shiny tool that we need to take off the shelf and then use. But really importantly, the point around how long this has taken. So the convention's over 30 years old now. And maybe to speak to Christine's point about why we need children's rights as distinct from, in addition to adult rights. So all children have all the same rights as adults, but then there's additional rights, because right back at the beginning of the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in the late 1940s, they said that childhood was a time of special protection, special care and protection that we needed to give. But it took a long time to actually start to realize that children weren't just many human beings that needed protection and got services. It took generations to get to 1989, where the convention actually said that children aren't just passive recipients, but active rights holders. And so we don't need to just make sure that children are kept safe and are given the things that allow them to develop, but participation is absolutely key. And so we recognize that children don't have this, and young people don't have the same economic power or same political power. All of the systems for decision-making are designed by adults for adults. And to need to recognize that by putting obligations on adults to actually seek the views of children and young people and protect children and young people's rights to protest, to express yourself, to form groups, to challenge and champion rights and act as human rights defenders. And so this bill was a big part of that. This was decades of work by the Children's Parliament and the Scottish Youth Parliament together, which is the Scottish Alliance for Children's Rights. Lots and lots of organisations led by children and young people challenging adults to do things differently. And so that's what's really exciting about it, is that this law was really through the result of really strong human rights defending work by young people. And actually the government opposed it. When I came into office 4 years ago, the government was strongly opposed to having this legislation because they said that we didn't need it in Scotland. We already did really well on human rights. And it's only been over the last few years, after decades of campaigning, that we've managed to secure this legislation. And we did it during a pandemic, which was amazing. But even 4 years ago, there was strong opposition from the government to this. So that's really, really exciting. And this is just the starting point. Sorry, Christine. No,
don't apologise. You managed to answer 2 or 3 questions there when only one was asked. So that's a bonus. Cara, what's your question for the Commissioner?
My question is just generally around young people in politics, but it's, what would your advice be for young people who want to become more politically engaged, and like where they would start on that?
My piece of advice would be listen to people that know more than I do, than the Children's Commissioner does. I think there's so many amazing and inspirational young people who are really well placed to provide support and inspiration. The middle-aged white guy in the suit isn't the person who's going to give inspiration for young people in terms of getting involved in politics and bringing about the change. But there's so many amazing young human rights defenders, activists on things like climate change, but also activists on things like girls' education, things like violence against women and girls, some of the strong leadership we've seen in Black Lives Matter. There's really amazing role models. Some of our new members of Parliament, which is a little bit more diverse. So we've got disabled members of Parliament. We've got women of colour. Some of those people, I think are really really well placed to provide that type of inspiration. All I would say from kind of a Children's Commissioner's point of view is that it's the responsibility of the adults around you to help you build those skills and to really help you fulfill those ambitions that some of you have got, and whether that's in politics or humanitarian or law or whatever it is. But the job of the adults around you and the right contained within the convention as part of the right to education is to develop all children and young people to their fullest potential. And I think that's probably what the adults need to do, is provide the environment. But I think the inspiration really as mine does, comes from other children and young people who are doing really amazing things. And we do need to shake things up quite significantly. And you'll be the ones that do that.
So just following up on that answer and the exhortation not to listen to the Children's Commissioner and the duty of others in the community to help with engaging with children and young people. One of the questions that's been asked by someone who's in our audience this afternoon is whether you, as the panelists, so this is not for you, Bruce, but for the panelists, whether you think that the business community could do more to provide a platform, to provide experience, to provide connections for young people. Now, business community is a quite esoteric, kind of abstract idea, but and indeed I don't even know if the kind of concept of the business community enters into your life much on a day-to-day basis. But Sophia, is there a gap there? Is there a kind of failure by people who work in business to be engaging properly with young people?
Once again, I think it's a mix. So from my personal experience in school, there's been some opportunities to work with businesses, for example, this webinar here. But I think that is a very good suggestion and a very good idea. And I think that perhaps providing more opportunities would be good, even if it's just sort of sourcing out to schools saying that we are in this business, and if any people is interested in this career would like to take part, then I think that would be really good. Especially because I think there's still a range of opportunities that aren't covered from within the classrooms of schools. And I think I'm probably definitely biased towards this, but I think linked to opportunities being offered by businesses, that would also give a good chance to creative students, because I don't think that the balance between academics and creative is currently being met in schools. So that could help bridge that difference, yeah. And
do you think that's a cultural question, Sophia, that creative endeavour isn't valued as highly, or do you think it's a resource issue? What's behind that?
I think it might be a societal issue, because even when I say academic subjects, I'm not completely sure of using that term, because I think a lot of the time taking sort of biology or going towards medicine or even law is seen as sort of a stable job decision or something that needs intellect to do. But sort of, I was explaining to someone the other day, the truth is that when you're in a maths classroom, they can teach you a formula, but it's sort of being in an art classroom that can teach you how to come up with your own formula. And I think creativity can definitely apply and help you excel you in all these sort of academic jobs, and I don't think that's valued enough. So I think sort of people who are in academic places and in charge of what we learn in schools, I don't think they realise that we're not sort of pushing for more art classes, although that would also be nice, but pushing for them to just recognise that creativity spans across a wide range of things, and it can really help.
I think possibly there's also a degree of jealousy, Sophia. I know that I was pretty good at quotes academic stuff and couldn't paint, draw, sing, dance, or do anything else. So I think there's probably just a bit of old people jealousy involved there as well as part of that problem. Did you have a question for the Commissioner?
I do. What right do you think the government will need to work most towards in able to sort of fulfill and make enough change for?
It's a really, really good question. Obviously, all the rights are interrelated, and so you can't kind of pull out one right and say that it stands alone. But one of the things that children and young people have said and has been about involvement in decision making and participation, and what that really means to give life to that, because the right to participation in the convention isn't just the same as the right to expression. It's not just the right for children and young people to express themselves. It's an obligation on the state to create an environment that can get actively get the views of children and young people. And that means decision makers getting out from behind the formal tables and the formal ways of making decisions and actually going to communities, going to children and young people who are affected and involving them in creative ways to make decisions. And that's the big change that I really want to see. And that flows through the delivery of all rights as well. Scotland's got significant problems. Poverty and mental health are the two big ones that children and young people talk to me about. Those are the rights that are contained within those need serious attention. But the cultural change probably for me is more focused on participation and decision making and the obligation to use all available resources to the fullest extent possible to deliver on rights. And so decision making and involving your voices in decision making is probably the biggest cultural change I want to see.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm gonna let Rebecca have the last word, or at least the last question. And Rebecca, you're I think the most advanced of our panelists in terms of your formal education and are moving out potentially of the protection of the UNCRC. Do you regret not having the bill sooner? Do you think it would have made a difference to how your childhood and young personhood was experienced by you? So that's my question to you, and then I'll let you also finish by asking your question of the Commissioner.
I think completely. Obviously, I'm someone who is super fortunate, you know, I'm very grateful to have the privilege that I do. But I think you always have to think of the worst, and you always have to think of the worst situation as a young person that you could be in. And this is the sort of bill that would be so good for those situations. And I think honestly, it's bringing young people hope that we will be heard and our rights will be protected if we're ever in a situation of need. And I think that's a really good thing. And I was going to ask, what are you doing to ensure that young people nowadays are getting sufficient mental health support, especially during the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a really important question, Rebecca. Even before the pandemic, mental health alongside poverty was the biggest issue that children and young people raised with me. And I think it's important that we understand that the obligation on the state to ensure mental well-being goes further than just kind of clinical mental health services. And so one of my worries is that a lot of the political discourse has been very focused on child and adolescent mental health services, the very kind of clinical end of when young people need support. But actually, it's the broader community-based mental health and mental well-being that is what young people talk to me a lot more about. So we need to put additional investment in. And so we're having discussions with government around that, but also really importantly, getting the services to where children and young people need them. And so for many children, not all, school is a really good place of getting support. And Cara, you mentioned this earlier on, that so putting supports into schools, like mental well-being, mental health nurses and others into schools is really important. And counsellors and the commitment to increase that hasn't been fulfilled yet. And so that's a big thing that we're asking government to do, is to get more support in there. But also I'm working across different parts of Scotland with some really interesting initiatives about peer-to-peer support. But one of the really important things is that children and young people need to be involved in the design of services as well. And this needs to be seen as a broader issue that's linked to education and development, not just purely as a health issue. But huge concerns over the last 16 months because of all the pressures of the pandemic. The impact on everyone's mental health, and including parental mental health, and I'm thinking about young carers who are looking after adults or siblings as well. The pressure on everyone has been immense over the last 16 months. And so there's a real obligation on the state at all levels to actively provide support to every single child and young person and their families, because I think there's a real risk that if we don't invest very heavily in providing that support now, then the consequences are going to be really concerning.
Thank you very much. I'm sad to say that is going to bring our discussion to an end this afternoon. I think I could certainly keep going for another hour or two, and I suspect we'd have an audience for it too. But I know that I've got other colleagues who would run in blind panic at the idea of me just carrying on ad infinitum. So if you could all hold on for one moment, because I do want to thank you. I just want to I want to remind our audience that when I was at uni, there was a saying that you kept Wednesday afternoons free for sport. Well, in June, you have to keep Thursdays free for the UNCRC, because we've got 3 Thursdays in a row coming up. Tomorrow we have a session on the UNCRC Bill and what it might mean for local government and local government services. That's at 2 o'clock tomorrow. The following Thursday, the 10th of June, we have a session on what the UNCRC bill will mean for the third sector and charities. And then the grand finale, the week after that, on Thursday, the 17th of June at 11 o'clock rather than 2, we're back with pupils from schools across Scotland for a debate on whether this UNCRC thing is a good idea or not. So if you can only make one of the 3, I would suggest that one, but there are sectoral sessions before then as well. So please do sign up on the website. It really is just for me now to thank everybody who's involved in today's event. Thanks again to SEAT for helping to support us and put this event on. Thank you very much to the Commissioner for making the time to be with us this afternoon, but particularly thank you to our panellists. A really fascinating conversation, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So thank you very much for your time, and hope to see you again at one of our further events. So goodbye from me and have a good afternoon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.